This is Ty and Mike from Topic Masters, and we are debuting a new show called The Scoreboard.
This show, we're going to be rating new movies that just hit the theaters and scoring them based off of their pacing, imagery, humor, story, their audio, intensity, and then our overall score.
It's that magical time of the year again where a fat, gray-haired man with glasses gives us the present that we always want in December. And no, I'm not talking about Santa Claus. I'm talking about George Lucas. And more importantly, I'm not talking about that gift that you want for Christmas. I'm talking about that annual, sweet, sweet Star Wars movie.
Yeah, Star Wars, Rogue One.
So, Mike, what did you think of the Rogue Uno?
I loved it. I had a massive hard-on during this entire movie.
But we are not here to talk about pitching tents. We're here to talk about the quality of the movie we saw. The first part of this video is going to be completely spoilers-free. We'll leave a timestamp saying when the spoilers begin, but just know before that time, we won't be ruining anything for you.
Alright, so the first category we're going to get into is imagery, and this is basically going to be a breakdown of what the movie actually looked like to us. My personal opinion is that the movie was gorgeous. They did a really great job making you feel like you were back into that New Hope era. Everything looked authentic and dirty and grimy, and it wasn't shiny like the prequels.
I think that anything that isn't like the prequels is a step in the right direction. I completely concur with everything you're saying. I went with a 7.8. I feel like some of the CGI, which we'll get into later, was a bit subpar, and that drug down the overall score for me.
I ended up giving it a 9 just because the whole time I watched this movie, it felt like Star Wars to me, and I have zero complaints about the imagery other than the one thing that we may end up discussing a little bit later.
Oh, we're talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
The second category is pacing, which basically just personifies the general flow of the movie. For me, the pacing was pretty spot on, but my score was not so gracious. Mostly because the beginning and the end of the movie, I was at the edge of my seat, I was entertained, but the middle of the movie didn't keep that same kind of flow, and I found myself just wanting something bigger to happen.
Yeah, I kind of concur on that. I thought they started this movie off brilliantly. Right away, I just loved this, and then somewhere in the middle, there were things that were happening, and it was moving the plot, but I just didn't really care. I wanted it to get to that climactic ending, and let me tell you, once you get to that ending, it is worth the wait.
With that in mind, our scores are 6.8 for me and 7 for Mike in the pacing category.
Our next topic is going to be humor. With this particular movie, Ty, it is a war film. So this is a little bit of a darker Star Wars movie, but surprisingly there was some humor in there, mainly coming from a character by the name of K2SO. How did you feel about the humor in this?
It worked as well as humor could work in a movie like this, so I'm more or less just grading on a curve for it because it's not supposed to be a hilarious movie.
With that being said, I ended up giving the humor in this movie a 7, and Ty, what did you give it?
I also gave it a 7.
Ooh,
Twinsies.
Twinsies! Our next category is intensity. So every movie needs a little bit of intensity in it, to keep us on the edge of our seats. I actually think that this movie had a lot of intensity, it being a war film and everything like that. Like, you really got a grasp of even though the next film is A New Hope, you felt like there wasn't a lot of hope for these characters going throughout the story. I ended up giving the intensity out of this a 9. What are your thoughts?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I also went with a 9.
Perfect. Especially when a certain somebody shows up on screen. There's literally no hope for those individuals.
Our next category is story. This is essentially just examining how efficient the storytelling itself was.
I mean, I felt like there were some things that they could have done a little bit better and expanded upon, but I still think it was a great overall story. I gave it an 8.
I also gave it an 8. Going back to what we were talking about with pacing, I feel like the story sort of bogged down the middle of the film and ruined the pacing slightly, but it was all necessary. So last up, we've got audio, which we are currently just combining the soundtrack and the sound effects into one overall score. For me, any Star Wars movie, the sound design is always amazing. You know what each sound represents. You know what a TIE fighter sounds like. You hear that sound, you know a TIE fighter's coming. You even know what the blasters sound like between the Rebels and the Empire. Audio design-wise, it was amazing. Soundtrack-wise, I really can't recall one single moment of soundtrack, which is unfortunate for a film in this franchise.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that at the end of the day, those are the key words there. It's forgettable. You don't remember what the soundtrack was. The music in this wasn't very good, and I'd say that's the biggest lackluster of this entire thing. Now, the sound effects, they're on par just like like every Star Wars film. The background music, I'll even bring it up. There was that one point where it was this weird kind of techno music in the background mixed with weird machinery. It sounded like they were trying to go to like a...
Yeah, we basically determined that it was probably an outtake from The Fifth Element, which, great movie, but not the same kind of movie.
Does not work in this film at all. Does not work. My score is, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give it a 6, the lowest out of all the categories.
I'm going to be sentimental towards the sound design guys and give it a 7. So that brings us to our overall scores where we add everything up, divide, and we figure out the mean for everything. So for me, I have a 7.6 out of 10 for the film.
Overall, I have it as a 7.7.
This will conclude the non-spoilers part, so prepare to bail if you haven't seen it. Last warning, spoilers are coming up. There is no crawl in the movie.
Oh my God.
No crawl.
There is no crawl. How do you feel about this incredibly ballsy move about no crawl?
I'm fine with it. They're trying to make a different type of movie and to visually show that it's a different type of movie by breaking the mold of how all the movies began. I think it's perfect. As a lover of Star Wars, sure, I would have liked to see the crawl, but I'm not going to complain about it.
I feel like the fact that there was no crawl in this did not hurt the movie experience overall for me. Now, for some of those not so hardcore Star Wars fans, maybe a crawl would have been necessary to get them to realize that this was not a sequel to The Force Awakens.
One of the things we both agreed on that we loved about the movie is the infinite gray area. It's great seeing heroes that aren't perfect. The closest one we got in the original trilogy was probably Han Solo, but he was still a good guy.
But he did shoot first.
The gray area was amazing, though. It's nice seeing that the rebels are willing to cross moral boundaries to get certain things done in the movie and not just pussyfoot around because they're supposed to be the good guys.
Yeah, we had Cassian literally trying to get information out of another rebel person, and this guy was very skittish from the beginning in that alleyway. They were about to be captured, and he makes quick work of the stormtroopers and worried about the other guy snitching. Just shoots him in the back because he's worried about him snitching.
That wily scoundrel.
He brings up a really solid point. He's been doing this since he was 6 years old. He doesn't know anything else other than to serve the rebellion.
The one thing I'm really curious about, though, and this kind of goes into our next topic about reshoots, is do you think that there was more gray area blurring in the original cut? Because I feel like they did a good enough job showing that the lines were blurred. But for me, I would have personally liked it if they showed the rebels getting their hands dirty a little bit more. You've got that scene at the end whenever all the rebels are like, we're with you to go on this suicide mission. And I think Cassian says, we've all done awful things, now we want to do something good. But just saying that we've all done awful things doesn't really encapsulate that they've done awful things.
Yeah, the only real character we got the gray areas from is the Cassian character. But as far as the reshoots, I honestly, watching this movie, I didn't see much of an issue with them doing reshoots. I know everybody's like, oh no, reshoots are a bad thing, but I did not see any reason to doubt that this movie wasn't going to be successful from the get-go. If anything, it seems like they cut more scenes out of this. At least they took off that horrible line, I rebel.
That is an amazing British accent.
Let's talk about who are some standout characters for you.
So Donnie Yen, his character is pretty amazing. I mean, if you've seen any Donnie Yen movies, you know how good he is as the wise, ass-kicking guy.
Yeah, some standout performances, definitely. Donnie Yen, the blind guy, he's great. The K2SO, for me, was by far my favorite character, but he doesn't make it. In fact, none of the characters make it. Everybody dies. But K2SO, great for the humor piece of it.
Yeah, he definitely had all the best lines. I'm not afraid to say that I was more emotionally torn up seeing a robot die than any of the human characters. Yeah. That's how good K2SO was.
What did you think about our villain, Krennic?
He was sufficient, but in the long line of amazing Star Wars villains, I think he will be at the bottom of the heap.
Yeah, I feel like he kind of got overshadowed by a certain other character. Did you know that Peter Cushing was going to be in this film?
I was surprised to see that they somehow figured out a way to resurrect Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
Oh no, wait, it was just really bad CGI.
Well, how did they end up paying Peter Cushing to be in this movie?
I'd like to think that they just took a check, put it on his gravestone, and said, thanks for all the hard work, Peter. You've been professional, just like every other time.
Now, as far as CGI is, it's not the best. I think it is this. It's a step in the right direction. I was honestly blown away by it the moment he turned around and I saw his face. Any other initial thoughts, Ty?
The thing that's encouraging about it is it looks a bit weird. We've officially hit the uncanny valley in terms of digitally recreating actors, which in theory we're going to get through that valley at some point, but as long as we're in it, it's going to feel a bit nauseating.
But overall, this guy is a supporting character in this film, and he's dead. He's not even alive. All right, now the big moment we've been kind of waiting for is there's another character that shows up, and he actually has smaller screen time than Tarkin, and that is Darth Vader. What did you think about the appearance of Darth Vader in this film?
I feel like I can speak for most people in saying that I was not disappointed one bit. The last sequence with him, where he just completely wrecks shop, basically gives everybody that Vader scene that everybody's wanted to see.
Yeah, I mean, this scene started in a dark room, down a dark hallway, very reminiscent of the way A New Hope opened, except instead of a very light hallway, it's a very dark hallway, and you hear Darth Vader breathe, and then he ignites his lightsaber, bright red. He goes down this hallway, and he starts cutting down dudes. He even uses the Force and lifts up a dude on the ceiling, and then cuts that dude in half. The moment all that stuff was going on, I was sitting next to Long, and I just grabbed his thigh, and I was like, oh! I couldn't believe it. Like, he was just slaughtering people. Then I will never forget the dude at the end of the hallway, and the door's kind of slowly closing, and there's a slight, like, gap open, and he has the Death Star plans. He's trying to reach to the other guy, and he's all like, take it! Take it! And then, what does Darth Vader do? He fucking impales that guy through the door, kills him, just in time for the other guy to grab the plans and start running for his life down that hallway. This was a creepy scene, almost a scary scene. It felt like out of a horror movie.
It was like a space slasher film.
Yeah, a space slasher film. Jason Voorhees walking down with a lightsaber. It was perfect.
The craziest thing about that Vader scene is it takes place right after one of the biggest battles in the history of Star Wars, and it still makes everybody shit their pants.
I felt like that battle was on the same par as the space battle we got in Return of the Jedi.
Basically the perfect mashup of Hoth and the battle over Endor.
And, one thing I feel like Gareth Edwards did brilliantly with this is he almost put that camera very low at the perspective of the troops. So you really got a good grasp of the scale.
Disney really couldn't have picked a better director just to show the scale of everything, considering that Gareth did Monsters, which a whole lot of people haven't seen, but you should see it if you haven't seen it because it's amazing. And the more recent Godzilla, he just knows scale really well.
Now, I would say, kind of to end this off, what were some things that you felt like could have been worked on, maybe slightly tweaked, adjusted with this movie?
I would have liked less CGI Tarkin or more reflections of CGI Tarkin. Make Krennic a bit more imposing instead of just the guy that wants all of the credit for the Death Star. And I guess my big thing is I wish they would have added a little bit more motivation for Jyn. She went from not caring to a full-on face turn where she was like, I'm full rebel now.
I agree with that a little bit. I felt like the only turning point for her was when she ended up finding Saw Gerrera again, and then he actually had the hologram of her father basically explaining, hey, I'm not a bad guy. I had to do this because somebody else was eventually going to make this super weapon. It might as well have been me to purposely put a weakness in here. I could see a little bit of emotion in her, the gears turning in her head. Maybe I should, tag along with this. It's bigger than me type of thing.
And I get that. It just feels like it's a really quick turn. I understand her logic, but for somebody not to see their father for that long and then a holotape of him telling her how much he cared about her and what he did, for her to be like, well, I hated you for pretty much my entire life, but this video makes some compelling arguments. And I suppose I wish they would have had some more Saw Gerrera in it too, just because I love me some lazy face Forrest Whitaker.
Any last overall thoughts?
Looking forward to the Han Solo movie.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up real quick too, is the way they treated this movie is this was a test to see if people will leave their homes to go see something other than a saga film, and I think it's going to pay off.
It restored my faith in the idea of prequels in general, and I can honestly say, without any reservation, this is the greatest Star Wars prequel movie ever made.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
By a lot.
Well, with that being said, we'll end you with Topic Master's Scoreboard review.